guys! So in today's video, I'm actually working on a watercolor piece for the first time in a long time, and it's actually an expansion of a piece that originally started out in my sketchbook. So I hope you guys enjoy, and I will see you there. So initially, I had considered doing this piece digitally, but I realized that pretty much all of the finished pieces I've been doing lately were digital. And though there's nothing wrong with that, I found that I was really starting to miss the feeling of traditional finished work, specifically watercolor. And as it turns out, I'm very out of practice, and that was to be expected. It's been a very long time since I've sat down with an original concept and actual watercolor paper and tried to create something that I could actually present as a portfolio piece. And actually, this lack of experience with it is exactly why I wanted to use it, because it's like anything else. The longer you let yourself get out of practice, the worse you're going to be in the long run. So I wanted to kind of nip that in the bud, at least as much as I could. The start of this piece was also quite different than how I typically approach any of my artwork. And I scanned in a page that I had done in my sketchbook. I enlarged it and I traced the main details against a window. And this is mainly because I don't have a light box, and the position was very rough on my wrist, and I have ordered a light box as a result. And a big part of that was also that this is a method I really would like to see myself using in the future. The idea of building sketches in my sketchbook and then perhaps even using tracing paper to create further layers and then enlarging and going through the whole process of actually doing the finished line work, because it feels very similar to what I do in Photoshop, and you can get a lot more precision. And I think that's why I tend towards digital art, is that precision. So finding ways to kind of imitate that feeling in traditional artwork will really prompt me to continue working with the mediums that I do enjoy using. Now, using the window, I really only blocked in the main areas, and when I actually started recording, I was adding smaller details freehand. And I was referring to my sketch for reference, but there was no tracing, it was just going straight in with ink. And in retrospect, that should have been a lot scarier than it was, but I actually wasn't very intimidated. And part of me thinks that the main reason for this is that I was using a fine liner, and I can get a lot of control with a fine liner. I've also been doing a lot of ballpoint pen sketches where I don't do any pencil lines at all. The original sketch was actually done straight in ballpoint pen. So that familiarity with pens in general maybe made this freehanding a little more comfortable. Now, with this piece, as with all of my pieces, I knew that I wanted to push myself in some way. And the main way that I wanted to push myself with this one is that I wanted to work in layers of color as opposed to applying the exact color that I wanted right off the bat. The main area where I really focused in on this was the skin tone. And I typically work in browns and skin tones, but I added layers of green and yellow and red and different tones to actually build the color as opposed to making a flat tone. And I do think that in the end result, it affects the dimension of the piece in a very substantial way. I also know that this is the way watercolors are quote-unquote supposed to be used, and I kind of wanted to see what I was able to achieve with that as my basis. but my general approach to art is to create in a way that makes me happy and not in a way that is supposed to be set in stone, if that makes sense. I think I get a lot more creativity and something that's more uniquely me, as opposed to me trying to fit into the boxes of what art should be. Because in my personal opinion, art shouldn't be anything except exactly what it is. Now, as I mentioned in the last video, I've recently realized that the colors I'm using in my artwork tend to be very similar to each other. I tend to use a lot of blues and a lot of purples and occasional yellows to get my point across. And I've really been wanting to push myself in that regard. So in this piece, I worked with greens and reds and even some oranges a little bit later on, and all of these colors I'm very unfamiliar with. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with them or that I even dislike them. I just don't reach for them instinctively. I have to make a conscious decision that I want to use something different. And it's that mindset of doing something different and creating something that's one step better or one step different than your last that I think ultimately leads to improvement. Now, overall, if I had the chance to do this piece over, I think the main thing I would do would be to use a finer brush to add this girl's tattoo, because in the end it sort of expands out a lot, even though her skin tone was very dry when I added the tattoo. But I think the brush I used was just too bulky, and it sort of floods into something that's almost less like a tattoo and more like something that's flowing in and out of her skin, which might be interesting if that was what I had intended and I had actually went into it with that in mind. But I didn't, and so it just looks a little awkward. Something else to mention about this piece is that I actually did add quite a few details with Prismacolor colored pencils after I stopped recording. And I didn't even really think to record. I had just had the piece sitting on my desk and I kept looking at it and feeling a little weird about it, like there was something off, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I finally just realized that there wasn't nearly enough depth or enough color or something, and so I went in with quite a few dark tones in her face and also in some of the roses to really make them pop. I also emphasized the highlights that I had initially added with pen and went in with a white pencil instead. I also gave her some eyeshadow in an orangey color, which was a little terrifying because it was one of those things that really could have ruined the entire piece if I did it incorrectly. But in the end, I love the way it turned out, and I really want to think about adding things like that, like makeup and tattoos and different types of piercing into my characters, because I really like that aesthetic, and I really just need to learn to be a little more intentional about that. So in the end, I think my watercolors could definitely use a lot of work, but this was a step in the right direction of improvement. If you would like to buy this piece, you can buy the original or prints in my shop. The link will be in the description and in the end card. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. Thank you all for being here, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. I also have finished a main channel video. It's been forever, I know, but I think I finally managed to find a method that works, and it's a concept I'm really excited about. So hopefully I'll start uploading videos on that channel more consistently. That's the plan anyways. I did the shoulder thing. Sometimes when I start talking, I like pop my shoulders up for some reason, like some kind of weird nervous tick.